Welcome, everyone. I'm Davida Ginter. I'm honored to host this panel discussion, Burning Out Won't Get You There, which focuses on the unique angle of leaders and change makers' burnout and how to prevent it on time. To meet this purpose, luckily, I don't have to do it by myself. I'm excited to have here around this virtual table an inspiring group of leaders who have two things in common. They deeply care about making social change happen, and they know something about burning out and coming out stronger from this experience. So I'm happy to introduce you one by one. Birgit Liaden, founder and CEO of the Ocean Opportunity Lab, has worked as change maker focused on sustainability and equality in the global maritime industry for 15 years, has moderated President Barack Obama on leadership, as well as NASDAQ's recent ESG summit on green finance. Welcome. We have Bill Dolan, Emmy-nominated President and Creative Director of Spirit Media, and the author of 7 DRM, the 7 Disciplines of Relationship Marketing, a book he authored after having a death experience that changed his life and his approach to purpose and burnout. Welcome, Bill.
Thanks.
And Christopher Brumley, change and facilitation consultant specializing in learning, complexity, and multiple frameworks, and also an author and a TEDx speaker. Welcome, everyone.
Great to be here.
Great to have you joining. You know, I just want to take a deep dive and start by addressing the sore point. What has been your experience with burnout? Or a significant emotional wake-up call? What happened there? Bill, maybe we can start with you.
Well, mine was easily definable. Grant, I think the revelation of burnout or life experience and how do you change your life or live a better life is usually gradual and it's kind of revealed over time. In my case, there was the shocking incident in 1999 when I was like going gangbusters as a producer. I was flying around the United States working on a lot of shows, and I had an opportunity to go to Nashville to sign a deal for a documentary. And 20 minutes into that flight, my heart stopped. And without going into all the medical elements of it, I will say that I was diagnosed with a condition that required a pacemaker. And I'd have a pacemaker in my chest. And 6 times a day, my pacemaker intervenes and keeps me from dying. And there's something beautiful about having a defining moment, or in my case, I would say wake-up call. Because, and I don't want to be sexist here, but I think a lot of guys sometimes need to be hit in the head with a 2x4 because we're so busy going, and then something happens. And it just, for the first time, gave me deep opportunity to reflect and consider but what my values are, what my purpose was, why I'm here, what I'm supposed to do with my life. And just the active reflection and the after-death experience I had was a turning point for me. And I can say I'm still on that journey. I'm never going to completely get it, but being in that place was a turning point for me.
Thank you. That's powerful to listen to that and to hear about your experience. Chris, what has been your experience with burnout?
So for me, I have burned out twice in my life. Both of them, they weren't quite work related, but work was heavily involved, which I'm sure is a story a lot of people have kind of been involved with. But essentially, the kind of first of these came at the end of 2014 when I was traveling massively for work. I was going through a number of extremely heavy personal things, both for myself and for my wife or my fiance at the time, with court cases and attempted deportation, all sorts of terrible things happening there. And my father was injured when he was on holiday when I wasn't there, and all sorts of other things happened. And then the year started off with one of my closest friends who was one of the most charismatic leaders I've ever known, just in terms of who he was, deciding that Valentine's Day was a good time to kill himself quite deliberately. And so, you know, a week after my birthday, it wasn't a good start to the year, let's say. And the culmination of that entire year was the fact that I just, everything got too much by the end of the year. And I literally just started coming apart a little bit. I had two people stressed. I was trying to deal with all of the stuff with him and all of the other bits and pieces. And then I took some time, but one of the things that I've found about burnout, especially in stress, is that it's quite nebulous. So you think you've recovered, and of course you've actually just got your foot back on the first step. These things take a lot of time. And I ended up being pushed and pushed and pushed by work. I was working for an American company at the time. Not all American companies have a very good reputation in terms of demands, let's say, and I was demanded of until I literally was run into the ground. Like, it was almost as if I'd had a stroke. I couldn't finish sentences properly. I couldn't think properly. I felt dizzy. And for somebody who's quite, I guess, agile cognitively, it was a very strange experience. And so I really burned out badly. It's taken a good 1.5 to 2 years to actually feel like I'm recovering. So that's kind of where I am at the moment.
Thank you. Birgit, I know your story and I still get emotional every time I hear it. I'd love if you can share yours.
Yeah, and I think my burnout story, it started the winter of 2016, but I think it went a bit before that as well. So in 2012, my father got cancer and he died. And I was running my own company at the time, and then I spent 3 months spending all of my awake time with him until he died. And then when he died, I had to take over the family companies. And at the same time, I found out that I was pregnant with my first son. So I could probably have burned out there, but I think I just didn't have the time. So I continued at just kind of fixing things and running. And then I had my second kid in 2014. And just a few weeks after I had that I gave birth to my second son, I also took on the job as the first female director of one of the biggest global shipping exhibitions in the world, and also the youngest leader. So the guys who had been before me were all 50. I was 32 when I took on the job, and the market was in the beginning of a huge crash. Then I worked my ass off while also having 2 really small kids, and I definitely wasn't gonna let that stop me. So by the time I came to the winter 2016-17, I was starting to get just so tired, and it didn't matter how much I slept. I was just constantly tired. I lost 17 kilos of weight over the time span of probably 7 months, but I ate. It's just that the food didn't kind of stick. And then I also I was trying to make sure that we had a huge workload on us, and I had a lot of pressure from the board and my CEO to deliver. And I also, as a quite young leader with background from HR, I also didn't want anybody inside my team to burn out. So I was super cautious about, whenever I saw that some of them had stress reactions, I would actually go in and try and take up more of their work rather than pushing them. So 2 months before our big exhibition, which is an exhibition gathering 35,000 people from all around the world, I had a blood clot in my finger. So I was put into hospital, and the doctor basically said that now this is just, you know, you are overworked. I've seen this so many times before, especially with women in your age and situation. So now you just need to get back home. You have to go on a sick leave and you have to relax. And then I told her that, well, that's, you know, in theory, that's great, but I'm responsible for getting in a huge exhibition. And, you know, I can't leave my team just 2 months before everything kicks off. So I'll continue. So I continued to work, and it was a period where I was very much exposed, like with media and big partners and customers, and you have to really like be out there all the time. And those 2 months, I worked really, really hard. But the only thing that I remember that I really wanted, my entire like body and brain and heart was like screaming for either staying in bed under the pillow and just hiding for 2 months, or to buy a one-way ticket to somewhere far, far away where nobody knew me. So I hung in there, and by the time we delivered, it went well, but I had like shrunken into a very pale and thin figure compared to my normal size, and people were worried. And I was just thinking that, okay, I know now that I'm overdoing it, and I'm deliberately now going into a burnout. But I also thought that, okay, once I'm done, once I've delivered, then at least I think it will be better for me to have delivered than jumping off straight before everything kicks off. So I deliberately chose to go for the burnout. And then I also thought that I would recover, you know, spending the summer afterwards and just kind of recover after. So I don't think I really took in how serious it was until it was a bit too late.
I appreciate that you are willing to share, because, you know, one of the things I really want to encourage, one of my purposes when working on burnout prevention, is to actually encourage people to open up a conversation about burnout. Many people are either afraid to expose what's happening for them, or, you know, just are reluctant to have this dialogue. And I think it's so important to start just by sharing, by reaching out, by seeking for support. And this is the first step. But now I want to ask you, I was actually planning to ask you, what was your biggest learning from this experience? But I want to shift the question, and I want to ask you, what did you need to unlearn from this experience? What do you need to unlearn from this period of time that led you to burnout? Who wants to start?
I'll jump in. I think I'm not sure it's like learning, because I think sometimes I'll talk about me, because I think there's slight differences in how we approach this. I just know that for me growing up, there was always this pressure to perform, and that my value is attached to my performance. You know, there's the old saying that we're not human doings, we're human beings, but we constantly measure ourselves by our human doings. What did we do? What did we get done? What are we going to get done? And that recognition of not even thinking about who I was, but what I could accomplish. And of course, there's value in honoring your promises. You know, I'm just thinking about this story about this giant event you were doing, 35,000 people. And the idea that you wanted to honor a commitment, you didn't want to let people down. And I think a lot of us are in that place where we think if we're weak, then we're not going to be considered strong. If we're vulnerable, people are going to take advantage of us. And if we stop doing what we're told to do or going to perform, our value diminishes. And so I can't say that was like a sudden revelation, but I realized I was immersed into a culture that was teaching me that. And I've had to unlearn that one step at a time. And I will tell you, every day, it's easy to fall back into it, especially when it's all around you.
Mm.
That you have to be able to say, I reject that notion about value. I reject that notion about doing. I am very conscious about who I am and the contribution I can make to this world without attaching a trophy to it.
Mm. And I would have to say, Bill, I so agree with you there, and I think it resonates a lot with my unlearning experience as well, because I think from my side, I've always I was originally a school dropout from the age of 16, and I've always been working so hard to like deliver and be good enough, and felt a lot of responsibility for contributing to others, up to a point where I forgot to contribute to kind of the basics of my life. So I think for me also, I had to learn from the bottom, really, that it had to be enough for a while just to exist. Actually, that I couldn't be anything for anyone. I couldn't be much for my kids. I couldn't be there for my coworkers or my family or friends. I just had to remove all kind of expectations from the outside, but also from within, I think, and just accept that for a while it was good enough, and also really important to just be and just breathe and try actually just to rebuild from the inside if I would have any chance to get back on my feet again.
I think, there's probably going to be quite a lot of similarity in what we're all going to be saying here, but I think I can add a few kind of extra parts to what's been said as well, for myself, certainly. I also learned something that I kind of knew before, and it's very easy to advise other people of this. As you say, you see it in other people, you help other people. And of course, we are creatures that live inside our own heads. Looking out externally to other people is much easier than introspectively being able to see these things with ourselves, because we don't have that same kind of lens. We don't have that same view of ourselves. So it's much easier to see it in others than it is in ourselves. And I think one of the things that I learned, even though I kind of, I had to unlearn quite a few things. And one of the things that I had to admit was that it's okay, not to be okay for myself as well. That being kind to yourself isn't something that you should frown upon, even though you might, easily conflate it with self-absorption or whatever. It isn't actually. Think back to when you're on an aeroplane. The first thing they say is, if the oxygen masks drop, put your own one on first, because how can you help someone else? So I'm rescue diver trained, right? So the first thing I do is make sure if I'm 30 meters underwater, I have my air, because I can't help anyone else if I don't have my air. And I think it's a very valid thing to think about. You've got to help yourself first. And I had to unlearn, I think, that I wasn't valid and that I didn't have much worth. I've spent most of my life struggling with imposter syndrome. I find it very difficult to assign my self-worth in any given situation. I always have done. And it comes back to, what Bill was saying. How do you measure success and worth? Like, what are you using as these metrics, really? And I think duty and obligation play a large part in that. And I think I had to unlearn that everyone acts as though we are all on a level playing field, right? We always talk about things like equality. And of course, really, to have equality, first you must have equity. We must all be brought to the same level before equality can really occur. So we are all on individual journeys. And I think it's very important to know your journey isn't someone else's, your context isn't the same, and we all have our own waypoints that aren't necessarily the same as others. And so for me, that was both a learning and an unlearning across all of that.
the notion of comparison is so evident here when we talk about burnout, in the sense that when we keep comparing ourselves to others, when we keep comparing ourselves to what we feel that's supposed to be the measurement of success, right? The desired final line there, that we should get there on time, staying powerful, being the rock for everyone, right? Being so courageous, and at the same time hold ourselves together. So that comparison is harmful by itself, because we compare ourselves either to idols or to a situation that is not real. Because what is this perfection that we keep aspire for? These are stories that we absorb from media or even social media in the last few years, obviously. But what is the reality, the human reality here? But I want to take it from here and ask you, beyond the personal sphere, I want to ask you about your roles as leaders, as change makers, as people who have some impact on others, maybe on some industries even. Do we have responsibility as leaders in the context of burnout prevention? I mean, maybe it's individual situation, maybe behavior change must come from within, in the sense that as leaders, we can't do anything to support others in burnout prevention. Yes, no, I'm really interested in your take about the leader's role in burnout prevention.
Of my experience, of course, I was already conscious about avoiding to burn out other employees before that. But now, as I'm building up my own company again for the past year, we have actually, I mean, we started having preventing burnout on the agenda when we launched the company last year with you and other leaders who have been through the same. But I think we have it up on the agenda in our team, if not once a week, at least every other week. So we actually make a lot of effort inside our organization to talk about how we feel, and also like to draw it back to the fact that even though we're working hard and we have a lot of things to deliver, nothing is more important than the health. So we try to make sure that we build a culture where there is a lot of room and kind of a safe zone for being open, but also for addressing your needs. I've said it to my team repeatedly that if you are stressing out of something, that there are too many things to be done at the same time, then let's sit down together and I'll help you prioritize, so that we can just, change the scope or postpone something. Or, I mean, nothing is so important that it's worth going rock bottom for. So that's our approach on it, actually very, very conscious on that part, because I think building up my company, if that would require somebody else to burn out along the way, then it would have been a failure for me.
Well, I'll jump in on that.
Yeah, sure, go.
No. It's your turn, Chris. Take it away.
Okay, I was going to talk about something that I focus on with a lot of companies, because as an advisor, especially in new ways of business during the stressful times that we're in, where we're rediscovering different methodologies of human connection, and we've gone through a very strange juxtaposition where we all went to, well, I don't go to Starbucks, but we went to Starbucks and we sat there next to each other looking at our phones and not talking. And once that physical proximity was removed more or less forcibly from us, we started realizing that actually we were missing this human connection, or the opportunity for human connection. So without physical proximity, we started creating more connections. And I found that a very interesting kind of starter to a lot of what we've kind of started thinking of. But when I talk to companies, to individuals, to leaders, I think it's a very human condition to focus on outputs over outcomes. And this is something I try to get people to look at a lot more. What is the optimal outcome? What is the most beneficial point that we can move towards on this journey as an ecosystem of people who are integrated and supporting each other? And of course, we've been conditioned through 150 whatever years of Taylorism and neoliberalism and everything else to look at profit, output. How many hours are you working? You don't look busy. I'll give you something to do. Like, what does that have anything to do with the outcomes of what you're contracted to do with the company? So I work on culture a lot with very large companies down to startups. And I think a lot of this kind of is influenced by what I was calling, before the actual pandemic, I was calling this a perfection pandemic, which we've had with social media, this toxic positivity, where, you know, everything has to be perfect and everything is wonderful and you should just give your all and always be outside your comfort zone. Well, I model comfort zones with people with learning. Comfort zones are there for psychological safety and for recovery. Like they do exist for a good reason. You don't learn that well in them, but you need to rest. So I talk a lot about humanity and leading by example. How do you define a leader? Somebody who leads is somebody who does this and guides you towards your own way of being able to do it. So for me, I guess support, compassion, and guiding to that door of learning, and understanding that, you know, I think Bill said earlier about vulnerability. In fact, I think Bridget said it as well. Vulnerability is not only okay, but it's actually a very human condition, especially for men, where men have been conditioned. They shouldn't have emotions. They shouldn't react to things. They shouldn't, you know, it's okay not to be okay. Vulnerability is very important. So, you know, when you look at limitations for working, one thing I look at is Kanban, right, which is a work in progress limitation, right? So you have a flow and you say, here's our backlog, this is what we're working on, and we're not going to work on more than this, because A, we're not going to do it properly, and B, we're going to burn out trying to do it. A CEO said to me a long time ago, ask yourself this question before you go home. Is the company going to fail before tomorrow morning if you don't do this one thing? And if the answer is no, go home. And it was a very refreshing thing to hear from a CEO. So I think there are a number of things to kind of consider there, but I work on all of this with companies. And the sad thing for me is it can be very frustrating because companies hire you for advice, but then they say, thanks very much. And then they just carry on in the traditional old ways of doing things, because especially in stressful times like the pandemic, for example, with COVID, we create what we call first fit mental patterns. I'm not going to bore everyone with how this works, but for decision making, we kind of do this. And when we are stressed, the first thing we do is default to established patterns that we've created neurally, right? So we literally have to change the physical structure of our brain to be able to learn these things differently, and that happens over time. So yeah, that's something that I work on, sometimes successfully.
Well, that, by the way, that was very inspiring. And as you shared that, I'm writing off checklists. Ooh, areas I really boo-booed. I made a mistake there. Ooh, got to fix that. Ooh, because I am one of those guys that grew up with that statement pasted against my wall that said, you know, growth only occurs outside your comfort zone. I never added the other piece that recovery, though, can occur in your comfort zone, because I was just, and you know, just to tell you the poster child I was before my death, I was one of those guys, especially in TV production, media, like bang, 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 we gotta just get this done, that I would, I would say things like, look, you can sleep when you die. Let's get this thing done. So that's the world I came from, and all we drank were Rockstar and Red Bull, and just like, you know, continue to push ourselves until you die. And then thank God I came back, because I could come back and say, ooh, I have something I've learned from this. You know, and one of the things that we talk a lot as leaders, particularly in business, about duty and performance and outcomes and things like that. And I think that's always going to be present in the workplace at some level, because every business is in the business of making promises and delivering. And that comes with some level of effort, sometimes extreme, extraordinary, sometimes boom, in the groove. But I think there's another burnout that exists in our culture. And after my death experience and a lot of deep reflection, it was the ultimate realization that every human being is born with a desire to love and be loved. And that desire to be in relationship and to be approved and to think that I'm worthy to be loved, I think is one of the most stressful experiences that we have every day. Because if you think about marketing, the world I kind of grew up in, we spend most of our time telling people they're inadequate. But if you buy our product, that's all going to be fixed. And that constant barrage of selling people on their inadequacy creates another sense of burnout in saying, how can I be adequate? How can I be valued? And if you look at some of the motivations, secret motivations, even I looked at in my own life, I realized my desire to get the trophy, my desire to accomplish, my desire to do great things. Yeah, it was based some altruistic, beautiful desire to make a difference in the world. But I was trying to prove to myself that I was worthy to be loved. That somehow you can look in the mirror and say, yeah, I guess maybe you are okay. Maybe you are valued. Maybe someone does love you for you. And I think as long as we are in a culture that continues to push inadequacy, and we live like you were talking about, Chris, and the neuro channels that I think the roots that talk about our inadequacy are so deep and so ingrained that it really is going to take an emotional, spiritual, psychological, sociological revolution that has to be very deliberate in every human heart to say, you know what, I am worthy to love and be loved. And to at least advance that by looking at every human being and saying, you are worthy to be loved. You're worthy to be treated with respect and honor and kindness and caring because of who you are, not because of how you perform today. And I think that's a tiny little breakthrough that I try to do in my business here. Of course, I still have, production bill that says, oh, we'll meet this deadline. But I try to back up and go, but I love you. And that's still at my heart. And I'm working really hard to build that new pattern.
Thank you. This resonates a lot with me because I don't believe in quick fixes. I believe in processes. I don't like formulas. I don't like those lists of do these 10 things and you'll be just fine.
They don't work.
They don't work. Intention, being conscious, deep processes, which means that it must be a change coming from leadership, from courageous leadership, from intentional leadership, from leadership that cares about the human aspect way more than the productivity and effectivity and everything, which are usually a positive results when we make this change anyway, but that's just the side effect. So I really appreciate what you have just shared, everyone, and I feel we have a lot of collective gained knowledge and experience here. So I want to pay it forward. What would you advise to young leaders, to change makers who start their journey? What would you advise them to maintain their well-being while they're pursuing their goals? How to prevent burnout on time, basically, but how to do it also in a very positive, encouraging way. What would you advise those young leaders?
I think Chris should take this.
Is this going to be me going first this time? Okay, no problem. My advice, I think, and this comes from a position of somebody who I'm still awaiting like a diagnosis for autism and so on. So I get overloaded really easily in terms of cognition, in terms of sensory overload, a number of other things. So I kind of have quite an interesting outlook on that anyway, let alone with all of the business, and life changes that we're going through at the moment. And I think overload is one of the big things. Anytime you feel that you are being overloaded, it's very important to remember that you do things right. My friend who died, I'm going to put it politely because he used to swear words when he was saying it, but it was essentially get stuff done, do things right. If you're going to do something, you do it right. And I 100% believe in that. And I have more hobbies than anyone else probably on the planet. I do too many things, way too many things. I wish I was a dolphin. Talking about sleeping, if I could switch half my brain off and just carry on doing stuff, I'd be kind of happy. I can't do that. Physiologically, it's not my thing. But when you are doing things right, it's very easy to fall off. So in complexity, we call this catastrophic failure, right? It's complacency-induced failure, catastrophic failure. You fall out of the domain of clarity into chaos or crisis. And it happens in a number of ways. And this is what happened with COVID in the beginning. It was crisis management was where we were. Doing things right it's very easy to fall off that cliff, to do things too right, too much, too long, too many things. So for me, one of the deepest aspects for me is balance. Balance is very important. Everything should be in balance. As humans, we have bodies, we have minds. So whether you believe in souls or not, you could look at souls as part of the triumvirate for balance. When you feel something's right and you know something's right, then maybe something is right. And I think that balancing your work and your life, and your work can be your passion, but passion can burn you out as well if you're not careful. Just getting energy from something doesn't negate physical and mental exhaustion from doing it, right? So do things right, but do it in balance. You need that rest time, you need that recovery time as well. Think about exercise, consistent incremental progress, but your muscles don't grow properly. You don't gain the benefits if you don't also rest and allow your body to recover, to reknit the torn muscle fibers, and so forth. So just to kind of round off that bit about complexity, I think I would also say be very aware, and this is going to sound a bit strange, but bear with me, be aware of categorizing things and trying to force yourself to those categories. It's a very human thing to do, but this leads to inattentional blindness where we create a perfect goal and we say, I'm going to have that perfect goal. And if you believe in yourself enough, you can do anything. And I don't think that's right. I think if you believe in yourself enough, you can reach your full potential, but that doesn't mean anything, right? You are very unlikely to jump off a mountain and actually just fly. But as you plummet down, saying to yourself, well, I just didn't believe enough, is not going to help you, right? You do need to actually use these things kind of in context. So try instead to look at where you are, allow sense to emerge from the data rather than pre-categorizing everything, which gives you tunnel vision, and say, if I take a breath, do I have new emergent serendipitous opportunities that are going to be easier for me to reach an even better goal, right? That's not going to kill me to get there. Are there easier ways to get things? Are there better ways to get better things? So that's kind of what I would suggest. Have a think about those things and just, let things happen as you move through your journey. Don't treat a waypoint as an end point, because it isn't.
That's beautiful.
I think from my side, adding to the points of Christopher here, I would say that creating like an open culture with people around you is important. So I would say for young leaders to find some different people that they trust and who they know wants what's good for them, and kind of asking them to check up on you every once in a while, like talk openly about these issues of pressure and stress and boundaries and focus, and also create a space where it's open for them also to provide advice, so that if they start seeing that it seems that you are getting too much chaos in your life, or if you seem like you're going out of balance, that they can actually check in on you and just kind of pre-warn you a bit, because it's not always easy to see that yourself. And I think a lot of the times we are just thinking that, well, I just have to, you know, get this done and then I will relax. And then you forget to relax. You push yourself too many times too hard over a lot of time. And then I think by having a few people that has a good insight in human development and can also kind of draw you a little bit back on your track, and maybe remind you to stop up and take a break, or to sit down and go through what you need to prioritize and adjust in your life. And of course, the other part, when with advice to young leaders, of course, is to create that same focus and culture within your organization. I think that's so important too. And I think also it starts with the leaders, that if we are open, if we are honest, and also if we share the more vulnerable parts of our stories and our personal lives, I think it creates also an arena where our colleagues and co-workers can basically feel more safe. And I think also when you feel more safe, you're more resilient, but you also have an easier way in and a channel to talk with your boss or your other colleagues, so that it doesn't have to go too far. And I think also inside the workplace, we also very often tend to see signals very much easier on colleagues that are, you know, getting a little bit too close to the wall, so that we can and should also take our responsibility of bringing up the dialogues and discussions. So that would be my advice, though, and openness.
That's great advice. Two brilliant minds. Hard to follow that. You know, I'm going to take a chapter out of my book, because I would say that what I would encourage every person to do is to decide to actively pursue and try to understand one of the greatest mysteries of the universe. And there's a lot of them, but one of the one that escapes us a lot is ourselves and our own heart and who we are. And I talk in my book about finding this authentic purpose compass that sometimes we pray for a map. I want a map. I want clarity. Everybody wants control and direction, and we want this, you know. But whether you believe in God or the universe or whatever, usually the answer to that prayer is not a map, but a compass. And it's a compass that's woven from really some things that are obvious already in our life. For example, we do have passions. And think about Chris, you know, I'm saying, I'm going to jump off a cliff and I'm going to fly because I have a passion to fly. You can be really passionate and be completely wrong about the physical reality of pursuing this. And I would say that there's a lot of people who have passions, and they've heard if they pursue their passion, they'll never have to work another day in their life, which I think is a lie, because there's another ingredient, and that is aptitude. Because I think all of us have been given gifts. I remember growing up when I was in school, there was like the art kid, and there was the math kid, and there was the athletic kid, and you know, everybody seemed to have some specialty. And I was a music kid. And it's interesting, if you find people pursuing passions for which they don't have aptitudes, it takes them a while to figure out that they don't have a career, they have a hobby. And that's okay. Find those passions and be enriched by them. But then look at those aptitudes and say, how does that fit with my passions? One of the dangers, of course, of pursuing your aptitudes is that for a lot of us, I'm a parent, 5 kids, it was easy for me to look at my kids and say, oh my gosh, you're good at this. You should be this. You're good at this. You should be this. And there's a lot of us for which we have aptitudes, but we have no passions. And if all you do is pursue your aptitudes without passions, all you get is a job. And there's a lot of people having jobs, and there are a lot of people with passions and hobbies. But there's a third leg, is reflect on those experiences. Look at your life and find those things that feed you versus bleed you. Find those things that stir your heart, for which you find bring you joy and also bring joy in the lives of others. And as an employer, I hire people to do roles. They get a gig. You're supposed to do X, you know, this on the production. But I'm constantly looking for the secret passions that they have, the secret aptitudes they didn't know they had, and to free them from the bondage of either ignorance or the pressures of culture or parents saying you have to be this. So if I can be a leader that can run a business that honors our promises and delivers excellence to our clients, but at the same time opens up a world to our team and allows them to see themselves and be rewarded with the richness of finding themselves while serving others, it's a joy to be a leader in an organization like that.
Thank you.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great words, Bill.
Absolutely. And
Very
I
insightful.
wanted to just say one more thing, actually, which I forgot, which ties into what both of you have said, which is kind of understanding as well that leaders are human. We make mistakes as well. And leader is not a job title. It's anybody who influences, usually positively, other people. So you don't have to be a CEO to be a leader. And I did a video a while ago, which Davida saw, and it's about how we are all really kintsugi, right? The Japanese art of pottery, where it's been repaired with gold or platinum lacquer. And we all have been or all will be broken at some point. And it's about accepting that we have been and that it's okay. And that's part of our new unique strength. And that's something I think is really important, going on from what you both said, for a leader to support, but also admit, I think.
Yeah, I can strongly relate. And my personal journey with starting to research around burnout has started from a very simple sentence, which was, you don't have to suffer in order to reduce world suffering. And that was something, a strong realization for me. Yeah, I can help others to reduce suffering, and I can show empathy without suffering myself in that process. We can make an impact and be happy and thrive in that process. A short minute before I want to thank you all, I want to share some keywords that I collected from this beautiful conversation here. We have talked about our sense of worth and value and our priorities sometimes to reprioritize. And we mentioned cultivating connection and mutual support. You've mentioned vulnerability, balance, responsibility. And I think even though those are just words or keywords, they could be widened to holistic approaches, how to handle our life and work in a healthier way, emotionally, physically, whichever way that we are trying to find here when we walk this path. So I really want to thank you for this insightful conversation about burnout prevention, about leaders and leaders' responsibility to cultivate well-being and prevent burnout on time. Bill, Christopher, Birgit, thank you for joining me to this beautiful discussion. And we will share this with our audience.
Thank you so much, Davida, for having us. It's been a joy and great to meet you all.
Yeah,
It's been an honor.
Thank you all for sharing. And thank you so much, Davida, for continuing to work so hard on raising this really important topic on the agenda. Much more people should be aware and really should strive for making a difference